They were already calling security before she said a single word. The radio crackled on the counter, sharp and impatient, cutting through the low hum of the terminal. A uniformed supervisor leaned forward and said, quietly but loud enough to sting, "Ma'am, step away from the desk. Now." The words landed hard. Heads turned. A rolling suitcase stopped mid-step. Somewhere behind the glass wall, a jet engine roared, unaware that a public judgment had just been passed. She stood still. Too still. As if moving would mean admitting guilt. Her name was Evelyn Carter, 57 years old, short silver hair pulled tight at the nape of her neck, a navy blazer worn thin at the cuffs. No uniform, no insignia. Just a leather briefcase resting against her leg, scuffed at the corners, heavy with things no one could see. The agent across from her, a young man with a red tie and a forced smile, wouldn't meet her eyes. He kept glancing toward the supervisor, then toward the woman standing off to the side with crossed arms and an expression sharpened by certainty. That woman's name was Lorraine Whitaker. Early 60s, perfect posture, pearls at her throat. The kind of person who spoke as if the room already agreed with her. "That's not how airline operations work," Lorraine said, voice smooth, almost polite. "You don't just walk into restricted areas because you feel entitled. I fly every month. I know what belongs here. And she doesn't." Evelyn felt the heat rise behind her eyes, but forced it down. Her breathing stayed slow, controlled, the way it always did when things went wrong. The check-in area sat just off the main concourse, glass walls on 3 sides, normally quiet, functional. Today it felt like a stage. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. A digital clock blinked 9:16 in the morning. Somewhere, a boarding announcement echoed, distant and irrelevant. "Ma'am," the supervisor said again, firmer now. His name badge read Thomas Reed, late 40s, tired eyes. He had the look of a man who had spent years smoothing over other people's messes. "Until we confirm who you are, you'll need to remain here." Confirm who you are. Evelyn let the phrase settle. She had spent a lifetime proving herself in rooms exactly like this. Conference rooms, hearing rooms, accident sites. Places where truth mattered more than comfort. And yet here she was, boxed in by glass and assumption, reduced to a question mark because of how she looked standing still. "I've already explained," she said calmly. Her voice carried without rising. "I'm here on official business. Your systems flagged a delay. I waited." Lorraine let out a short laugh. Not loud, not cruel. Worse, amused. "That's what they all say when they get caught. Official business. Please." She turned to Thomas. "I'm not comfortable boarding any flight while someone like this is wandering around secure operations. You can quote me on that." Someone like this. A woman nearby, maybe in her 70s, paused with her cane mid-step. She studied Evelyn's face, the lines around her mouth, the steadiness in her eyes. She said nothing, but she didn't move on either. Behind the counter, a second employee, Maria Lopez, hovered near a terminal, fingers frozen above the keyboard. She had been with the airline long enough to recognize when procedure was colliding with politics. Her jaw tightened. "Sir," she said quietly to Thomas. Her name cleared initial screening. "The delay was on our end." Thomas didn't answer. His phone buzzed in his hand. He glanced at the screen, then away, as if the decision had already been made somewhere above his pay grade. Evelyn shifted her weight. The briefcase tapped softly against the floor. Inside it were documents she had reviewed 100 times. Maintenance logs. Internal memos. A timeline that told a story no one wanted told. She hadn't planned to open it here. Not like this. "Let me guess," Lorraine said, leaning closer, lowering her voice as if sharing a confidence. "You're going to tell us you work for the government, or the airline, or some contractor no one's heard of, and we're supposed to just nod and let you through." Evelyn met her gaze for the first time, really looked at her, saw the certainty, the comfort of never being questioned. "No," she said. "I'm not asking to be let through." Lorraine blinked. That wasn't the answer she expected. "I already was," Evelyn continued. "Your system logged it at 8:42 in the morning. You can check." Maria's fingers moved before she could stop herself. Keys clicked. Her screen refreshed. Her eyes widened just slightly. Thomas noticed. His shoulders stiffened. "Maria." "She's right," Maria said, voice low but steady. "There's an entry. Cleared access. Internal authorization." Lorraine's smile faltered. Just for a second. Then it hardened. "So now we're trusting a glitch over common sense?" The word glitch hung there, convenient and dismissive. Evelyn felt the familiar ache in her chest. Not fear. Weariness. She thought of the night before, alone in a hotel room, reviewing reports until her eyes burned. She thought of the families whose names were printed in small type at the back of those files. She thought of how many times she had been ignored, until it was too late. A low murmur rippled through the nearby passengers. A man in a windbreaker shook his head. Another pulled out his phone, not recording, just holding it like a reflex. "Ma'am," Thomas said, softer now, but still guarded. "Until we resolve this, I need you to stay put." Evelyn nodded, slowly. "Of course." Her compliance seemed to irritate Lorraine more than defiance would have. "Unbelievable," she muttered. "This is exactly how standards slip. You let one person through, and suddenly rules don't matter." Rules. Evelyn almost smiled. From somewhere deeper in the terminal came the sound of hurried footsteps. Not running. Purposeful. A different energy. Thomas glanced up instinctively. Evelyn didn't turn. She already knew that sound. Knew the rhythm of it. The way rooms changed when certain people entered them. But for now, she remained where she was. A woman in a worn blazer, a briefcase at her feet, surrounded by glass, watched, judged, waiting. And no one there yet understood how much trouble they were already in. Lorraine Whittaker noticed the change in the room before she understood it. The sound came first. Shoes against tile. Measured. Confident. Not rushed, not apologetic. The kind of walk that did not ask permission to take up space. Conversations around the glass-walled operations area thinned, then stilled, like air being pulled from a chamber. Even the hum of the fluorescent lights seemed to fade into the background. Thomas Reed straightened instinctively. His hand dropped from his radio. His shoulders squared, not out of authority, but recognition. Maria Lopez felt it too. Her spine tightened, her eyes flicking toward the corridor without conscious thought. Evelyn Carter finally turned. A man in his early 60s approached from the far end of the concourse, flanked not by security, but by two quietly dressed executives who carried themselves like people used to being ignored until it mattered. He wore no suit jacket, just a charcoal blazer over an open collar shirt. Grey hair, calm face. The kind of face you trusted without knowing why. Daniel Harper, Chief Executive Officer of North Star Airlines. Lorraine's breath caught. Not visibly, not enough for anyone else to notice. But inside her chest, something shifted, sharp and unwelcome. She had seen that face before. Magazine profiles, investor calls. A keynote speech at a charity gala 3 years back. She had even applauded him once, standing beside people who mattered. He stopped just outside the glass, eyes scanning the scene with unsettling precision. The briefcase at Evelyn's feet, Thomas's stiff posture, Lorraine's crossed arms, Maria's half-frozen hands. He didn't ask questions. Not yet. "Why is my operations corridor blocked?" Daniel said. It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. The words landed clean and final. Thomas swallowed. Sir, we had a report. A concern raised by a passenger. We're verifying. Daniel's gaze slid to him. Whose concern? Lorraine stepped forward before Thomas could answer. Mine, she said, chin lifting. I'm a frequent flyer with this airline, and I found it extremely troubling to see an unauthorized individual inside a restricted area. Frankly, I'm surprised it took this long for someone in charge to respond. Daniel looked at her now. Really looked. The pearls, the posture, the practiced confidence of someone accustomed to being heard. Unauthorized, he repeated. Is that your conclusion, or is that a finding? Lorraine hesitated, a fraction of a second. It's common sense. Daniel nodded slowly, as if considering a complicated idea. Then he turned to Maria. Ms. Lopez, did this woman breach access protocol? Maria felt the weight of the moment press into her lungs. She thought of her mortgage, her parents, the years she had spent learning when to speak and when to disappear. Then she thought of the screen she had seen moments ago, the clearance code, the timestamp. 8:42 in the morning. No, sir, she said. Her voice trembled, but it did not break. She didn't. Daniel turned back to Thomas. Then why is she being treated like she did? Thomas opened his mouth, closed it. Sweat gathered at his temple. The complaint came from a high-value customer, sir. We followed escalation protocol. Daniel's eyes hardened. Escalation protocol exists to manage risk, not to suspend judgment. Lorraine's lips pressed thin. With all due respect, she said, I don't think you understand the position you're putting passengers in. If standards aren't enforced... Standards are enforced by evidence, Daniel cut in. His tone sharpened. Not discomfort. The word hung there, exposed. Evelyn remained silent. She watched the exchange like someone observing weather patterns from a safe distance. She had learned long ago that the truth did not always need defending. Sometimes, it only needed the right person to hear it. Daniel finally faced her. His expression changed then. Not dramatically, subtly. The tightness around his eyes eased. His voice lowered. Ms. Carter. Lorraine stiffened. The name landed differently now. Yes, Evelyn said. I'm sorry you were delayed, Daniel said. You should have been escorted directly to the review room. Lorraine stared at him. Review room? Daniel nodded. Internal compliance. A murmur rippled through the small crowd that had gathered outside the glass. Someone whispered. Someone else shifted uncomfortably. Lorraine's voice rose despite herself. Compliance with what, exactly? Daniel held her gaze. With federal safety standards, maintenance oversight, incident reporting. Evelyn reached down and lifted her briefcase. The leather creaked softly. She set it on the counter between them and snapped it open. Inside were neatly stacked folders, labeled, dated, tabbed with precision. Daniel didn't touch them. He didn't need to. These are preliminary findings, Evelyn said. Her voice was steady, but something deeper moved beneath it now. Resolve. They outline repeated procedural shortcuts taken over the last 18 months. Deferred inspections, pressured sign-offs, patterns that don't show up unless someone knows where to look. Lorraine's mouth opened, closed. This is absurd. What does this have to do with me? Evelyn looked at her, not with anger, with something colder. You asked why I was here. Daniel answered instead. Because Ms. Carter works under my direct authorization. Because she leads an independent audit team, reporting not to operations, but to my office and the Department of Transportation. I didn't come here to be seen, she said quietly. I came because people died when corners were cut, because reports were buried, because no one listened when they should have. Daniel nodded once. And because this airline will not become another headline. Lorraine shook her head. You can't just let her. Daniel turned fully toward her now. His voice dropped. Ms. Whitaker, your comments today were recorded. Your interference documented. Effective immediately, your frequent flyer status is suspended pending review. Her face drained of color. You can't do that. I can, Daniel said. And I am. The glass walls reflected Lorraine's expression back at her. Shock. Disbelief. The sudden realization that the room had shifted and she was no longer standing on solid ground. Security approached quietly. Not aggressive, professional. Evelyn picked up her briefcase. Her hand trembled just slightly. No one noticed but Daniel. Let's continue, he said to her, turning toward the inner corridor. As they walked away, the sounds of the terminal returned in waves. Announcements, rolling luggage, life resuming. Behind them, Lorraine Whitaker stood frozen, surrounded by people who no longer looked at her with agreement, but with distance. Evelyn did not look back. She had work to do. The hallway swallowed them whole. Glass gave way to concrete. Bright concourse light dimmed into a cooler, controlled glow. The sound changed too. No chatter, no rolling bags. Just the low mechanical breathing of a building that never truly slept. Evelyn walked beside Daniel Harper, her steps measured, her shoulders squared. But inside her chest, something still shook loose, like debris after a delayed impact. She had not planned for this to happen here, not like this, not in front of witnesses. Daniel didn't speak until the door behind them sealed shut with a soft, pneumatic hiss. He slowed, then stopped, turning to face her fully for the first time since the corridor. You should have been protected, he said. Evelyn let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. You gave authorization. That's protection enough. That authorization was meant to keep you invisible. She nodded. Invisibility only works until someone decides you don't belong. Daniel studied her face, the fine lines around her eyes, the discipline carved into her posture. They delayed you longer than the system lag justified. Yes, because of the complaint. Yes, because of who made it. Evelyn didn't answer immediately. She opened the briefcase again, not to show him documents this time, but to steady herself. Her fingers brushed the edge of a folder marked with a thin blue tab. She closed it again. She wasn't the reason, Evelyn said. She was the trigger. Daniel's brow tightened. Explain. Evelyn resumed walking. He followed. When people like her speak up, she said, systems listen faster. Not because they're right, because they're loud in the right places. They passed a window overlooking a maintenance bay. A wide-body aircraft sat docked, panels open, ladders leaning like ribs against steel. Mechanics moved below in practiced choreography. It looked orderly. It always did. That plane, Evelyn said, stopping. Tail number ends in 742. Daniel glanced down. I know it. It flew twice last month, with a deferred inspection that should never have been deferred. Daniel's jaw set. Operations signed off. Operations were pressured, Evelyn said, by people whose bonuses depend on on-time departures. Daniel turned toward her fully now. Names. Evelyn met his gaze. Not yet. He didn't push. That told her more than words ever could. They entered a small conference room. No windows, just a long table, a screen on the wall, and chairs that had heard too many hard conversations. Evelyn placed the briefcase on the table, opened it with care, and slid one folder forward. This stays between us for now, she said. If this leaks early, it turns into a performance. People posture. Evidence gets buried deeper. Daniel took the folder, but didn't open it. You're asking me to trust you while my airline is already under scrutiny. I'm asking you to trust the process you authorized, Evelyn replied, and the person you put in charge of it. Silence stretched. Thick. Evaluative. Finally, Daniel nodded. You'll have full access. No interference. Evelyn exhaled. Just a fraction. Good. Outside the room, the airport continued its rhythm, unaware that its heartbeat had just been examined under a microscope. Meanwhile, back near the glass corridor, Lorraine Whitaker sat rigid in a chair she had not chosen. Her pearls felt too tight against her throat. A security officer stood nearby, polite but immovable. People passed. Some recognized her. Most didn't. That was worse. She replayed the moment over and over. The way the man had said her name. The way the room had turned. This was not how consequences were supposed to work. Consequences were for other people. Her phone vibrated. A message from her husband. One line. Have you seen the news? Her fingers trembled as she opened the link. A grainy video clip. Her voice, clear, certain, saying things that had felt reasonable seconds ago and now sounded exposed, brittle, ugly. The caption read simply, "Airline audit disrupted after passenger complaint." Lorraine swallowed hard. Across the terminal, Maria Lopez leaned against the counter, legs weak. Thomas Reed stood beside her, rubbing his temples. "I didn't know," Maria said quietly. "I swear I didn't know." Thomas nodded. "Neither did I." "But we still—" Maria stopped herself. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. Thomas straightened. "We'll be called in." "Yes, and we'll answer." Maria nodded. She thought of Evelyn's eyes. Not angry, just tired. The kind of tired that comes from carrying something heavy alone for too long. In the conference room, Evelyn clicked on the screen. Data bloomed across it. Charts, timelines, patterns that told a story without raising their voice. Daniel watched in silence. "This isn't about one airline," Evelyn said. "It never is. It's about what happens when speed becomes virtue and caution becomes inconvenience." Daniel folded his arms. "You're asking me to slow everything down." "I'm asking you to decide what you're willing to explain later," Evelyn replied. "A delay or a disaster." He closed his eyes briefly, then opened them. "How long?" 6 weeks, Evelyn said, "if no one interferes." "And if they do?" Evelyn's mouth curved, just barely. Not a smile, something sharper. "Then they identify themselves." Daniel returned the look. "You planned for that." "I always do." A knock sounded at the door. Controlled, professional. Daniel glanced at Evelyn. She nodded. A security liaison stepped in. "Sir, media inquiries are coming in, and legal wants to brief you on the passenger situation." Daniel sighed. "Of course they do." He stood. "Ms. Carter will remain on site. Full access. Discreet." The liaison nodded, eyes flicking briefly to Evelyn with new understanding. As they left, Evelyn remained seated, staring at the data on the screen. The numbers. The gaps. The quiet warnings hidden in plain sight. Her phone buzzed. One message. Unknown number. "You were right. I should have listened sooner." She didn't reply. Outside, the aircraft with the 742 tail sat silent, waiting. So did a system that had been exposed to light it could not unsee. And somewhere between the noise of the terminal and the stillness of the audit room, the real story was only beginning to take shape. The call came just after noon, when the airport light shifted from pale to hard. Daniel Harper stood alone in his temporary office overlooking the east apron, phone pressed to his ear, watching a fuel truck inch toward a waiting aircraft. His face didn't change as the voice on the other end spoke, but something in his posture tightened, like a cable pulled too far. "Yes," he said. "I expected that." A pause. "No, not yet." Another pause, longer this time. "Because once we do, there's no going back." He ended the call and didn't move for several seconds. Below him, a ground crew member raised a hand, signaling clearance. The plane began to push back, on time, as always. Daniel turned from the window and walked back down the corridor toward the compliance wing. Each step echoed with the weight of decisions already in motion. The audit had begun the moment Evelyn Carter crossed that threshold. Everything since had only been noise. In the conference room, Evelyn sat alone, jacket draped over the chair beside her. She had rolled up the sleeves of her blouse, forearms resting on the table as she worked through a stack of maintenance logs. A pencil lay between her fingers, tapping once every few seconds. Not impatience, calculation. She looked up when Daniel entered. "They caught you?" "Yes." "Operations or legal?" "Both," he said, taking a seat across from her. "Separately, within 5 minutes of each other." Evelyn nodded. "That didn't take long." "They're worried about exposure." "They should be worried about truth," she replied. Daniel studied her. "You said 6 weeks." "That's still the estimate," Evelyn said, "if no one interferes." He leaned back. "They're already trying." "Of course they are." Daniel rubbed his jaw. "They want to know why you weren't escorted by internal security, why your presence wasn't flagged to the board." Evelyn's eyes hardened. "Because if the board knew, the patterns would change overnight. Temporary compliance, cosmetic fixes, and then back to business." Daniel exhaled slowly. "You're asking me to let this burn. I'm asking you to let it be seen," she said. "Burning comes later." A knock interrupted them. Soft, cautious. Maria Lopez stepped inside, clutching a tablet to her chest like a shield. Her eyes flicked to Daniel, then back to Evelyn. "I was told you wanted to see me?" Evelyn gestured to the chair beside her. "Thank you for coming." Maria sat, back straight, hands folded too tightly in her lap. "I reviewed the access logs again," Maria said quickly. "Every entry, every override. What happened this morning wasn't a system failure. It was a manual delay." Daniel's gaze snapped to her. "By whom?" Maria swallowed. "It routes through a supervisory node, but the authorization code traces back to operations." Evelyn closed her eyes for a moment, not in surprise, in confirmation. "They slowed your clearance," Maria continued, voice gaining strength. "Not because they had cause, but because someone told them to wait." Daniel leaned forward. "Who?" Maria shook her head. "I don't know yet, but I can find out." Evelyn met her eyes. "Doing so will put you on someone's radar." Maria hesitated, then nodded. "I know." Silence followed, the kind that measures resolve. "Why would you risk that?" Daniel asked. Maria took a breath. "Because I watched them treat you like you didn't belong, and I let it happen." Her voice wavered, then steadied. "I don't want that on me." Evelyn studied her for a long moment. Then she placed a hand flat on the table. "Then you work with me. Quietly. Carefully." Maria nodded. "Yes." As Maria left, Daniel turned to Evelyn. "You're building a team." "I'm identifying people," Evelyn said. "There's a difference." Another knock, this one sharper. Thomas Reed stepped in, face pale, eyes rimmed with red. He didn't sit. He stood, hands clasped behind his back like a man awaiting judgment. "I've been informed my actions this morning are under review," he said. Daniel's expression was unreadable. "They are." Thomas nodded once. I want it on record that I didn't believe she was unauthorized. Evelyn looked up. But you treated her like she was. Yes, Thomas said. His jaw tightened. Because I was told to. Daniel's eyes narrowed. By whom? Thomas hesitated, then spoke. Regional operations. The message was clear. Delay, verify, avoid escalation. Evelyn's pencil stopped tapping. Who specifically? Daniel pressed. Thomas swallowed. I can't say without protection. Daniel considered this. You'll have it, if you cooperate fully. Thomas nodded. Then yes, I'll say. He named a name, one that had appeared more than once in Evelyn's files. Not at the top, never at the top, always just beneath it. Close enough to influence, far enough to deny. When Thomas left, the room felt smaller. That's the first thread, Daniel said quietly. Evelyn nodded. Pull it too hard, and it snaps. So we pull slowly. Yes. Across the terminal, Lorraine Whitaker sat in a private lounge she had been escorted to without explanation. Her phone lay face down on the table. She didn't need to see the notifications stacking up. She could feel them. Each vibration, a reminder that control was slipping. A man in a tailored suit approached. Late 50s, legal eyes. He introduced himself softly. Corporate counsel. Ms. Whitaker, he said, taking a seat across from her. I'm here to discuss your status with the airline. Her lips parted. This is a misunderstanding. He nodded politely. That will be reviewed. When? Soon. Lorraine's fingers curled into her palm. You're making a mistake. The man smiled thinly. We'll let the record decide. Back in the compliance wing, Evelyn stood alone at the screen again. New data filled the space. Routes, schedules, deferred actions mapped across time. A picture forming. Not of negligence, of pressure, of quiet compromises made by people who believed no one was watching. Her phone buzzed. This time, she answered. Yes? A voice she hadn't expected. Familiar. Tired. You were right, it said. About all of it. Evelyn closed her eyes. Then help me finish it. The call ended. Outside, the afternoon sun slid lower, casting long shadows across the tarmac. Planes continued to depart, land, depart again, the rhythm unbroken. For now. Inside, something fundamental had shifted. The audit was no longer invisible, and neither was Evelyn Carter. By early evening, the airport carried a different kind of tension. Not the sharp urgency of delays or the controlled panic of missed connections, but something heavier, slower, like a storm waiting offshore. The compliance wing lights dimmed automatically as daylight slipped away, casting long reflections across polished floors. Evelyn Carter hadn't noticed the time passing. She rarely did when patterns began to align. She stood alone in the records room now, surrounded by shelving that smelled faintly of paper and machine oil. Boxes labeled by year, by fleet, by incident classification. Her fingers moved with quiet precision, pulling one file after another, laying them open across a wide metal table. She wasn't skimming anymore. She was confirming. Deferred inspections that clustered around the same maintenance base. Crew reports marked resolved without follow-up. Digital signatures reused at impossible intervals. Not mistakes. Not accidents. Decisions. Her phone vibrated. She ignored it. Across the hallway, Daniel Harper met with legal counsel and two board members who had arrived earlier than expected. Their voices stayed low, but the air between them crackled with disagreement. One of the board members, a former defense contractor in his 70s, leaned forward, fingers steepled. "You're letting this grow legs," he said. "An internal review doesn't need to become a spectacle." Daniel didn't raise his voice. "It already is, and you're comfortable with that. I'm responsible for it." The other board member, a woman with decades of regulatory experience etched into her posture, studied Daniel closely. "Is she solid?" Daniel answered without hesitation. "She's better than solid. She's patient." That earned him a look. That's not always a compliment. It is in this case. Back in the records room, Evelyn finally answered her phone. "Yes." Maria Lopez's voice came through, tight but controlled. "I found something." Evelyn closed the file she was holding. "Talk to me." "The delay authorization code," Maria said. "It wasn't issued from operations directly. It was routed through safety compliance. Someone used an emergency review override." Evelyn's eyes narrowed. "That override requires dual authorization." "Yes," Maria said. "And I traced the second approval." "Who?" A pause. Then, quietly, "Someone who retired last year." Evelyn felt a chill move through her chest. Retired people don't approve live actions. "That's what I thought," Maria replied. "Which means someone is using dormant credentials." Evelyn closed her eyes for a moment, letting the implications settle. "Send me everything. Don't copy anyone else." "I already isolated the logs," Maria said. "But Evelyn, if this goes public..." "It won't," Evelyn said. "Not yet." They disconnected. Evelyn leaned back against the table, staring at the ceiling. Dormant credentials meant access without accountability. It meant systems designed for continuity had been repurposed for cover. It meant the rot was older than she'd hoped. She straightened and gathered the files into a single stack. One story, one timeline. When she stepped back into the corridor, she nearly collided with Thomas Reed. He looked worse than before. Tie loosened, sleeves rolled. A man who hadn't slept since morning. "They've reassigned me," he said. "Effective immediately." Evelyn didn't react. "Where?" "Terminal operations. No supervisory authority." He hesitated. "I deserved it." "Maybe," Evelyn said. "Maybe not. Depends what you do next." Thomas swallowed. "I wanted you to know I told them everything." "I know." "How?" "People who tell the truth don't need to say so twice." That landed. Thomas nodded once. "If you need anything, I'll help." Evelyn studied him, saw fear, regret, and something else. Relief. "Then don't disappear," she said. "That's how this survives." He nodded again and walked away, shoulders a fraction lighter. Across the terminal, Lorraine Whitaker sat alone in a quiet corner of the private lounge. The room was designed for comfort. Soft chairs, warm lighting, a bar no one staffed anymore. She felt none of it. Her phone lay on the table, screen dark. She had stopped checking it. The last message from her husband still echoed in her head. "We need to talk." "Not now. Not here." A younger woman approached, hesitant. Airline customer relations. Late 30s, clipboard held like armor. "Ms. Whitaker," she said gently, "we'll be escorting you to your gate shortly." Lorraine looked up sharply. "So I'm still flying?" "Yes," the woman replied. "For now." The phrase burned. Lorraine rose, smoothing her jacket, reclaiming posture. "I expect a full apology for how I was treated." The woman didn't argue. "That will be addressed." As they walked, Lorraine caught glimpses of people glancing her way. Some curious, some knowing, none deferential. She had the sudden, disorienting sense that something fundamental had shifted, and she hadn't been invited to adjust. In the compliance wing, Daniel Harper stood at the window again, watching the lights trace paths across the runway. Evelyn joined him without announcement. "You found something," he said. "Yes. Something big." "Yes." He waited. "Dormant credentials," Evelyn said. "Someone with enough access to manipulate safety reviews without triggering alarms. Someone who thought retirement meant invisibility." Daniel's jaw tightened. "Names." "Soon," she replied. "But this goes higher than operations." Daniel exhaled. "It always does." They stood in silence, watching a plane lift into the darkening sky. "You know what happens next," he said. "Yes. They'll push back. Hard. I'm counting on it." Daniel turned to her. "This puts you directly in the line of fire." Evelyn met his gaze. "I've been there before." "Yes," he said softly. "You have." Her phone vibrated again. A message this time. "Unknown number. Stop digging. Some doors are better left closed." She showed it to Daniel. He read it once, then again. "They're getting nervous," he said. Evelyn deleted the message. Good. Night settled fully over the airport. The steady rhythm of departures continued, but beneath it, something else pulsed. Fear. Anticipation. The sense that a reckoning was forming just beyond the visible horizon. Evelyn gathered her briefcase and headed back toward the records room. She had one more cross-check to run, one more confirmation to make before the picture was complete. Behind her, Daniel watched the reflection of her retreating figure in the glass. A woman underestimated at the wrong moment by the wrong people. And for the first time since the audit began, he felt something he hadn't expected. Confidence. Whatever came next, it would not be quiet, and it would not be contained. The first grounding order went out just before midnight. Not public, not announced. A quiet directive routed through internal channels, flagged urgent, but framed as routine. 3 aircraft, same maintenance base, same deferred inspection pattern. Evelyn Carter watched the confirmations populate her screen one by one, each green checkmark a small fracture spreading through a facade built on punctuality and profit. She didn't celebrate. She never did. Across the table, Maria Lopez sat rigid, arms folded tight around herself, as if holding something in place. The glow from the monitor washed her face pale. "They're going to notice," she said. "They already have," Evelyn replied. "They're just deciding how to respond." Daniel Harper entered without knocking. His jacket was gone now, sleeves rolled, tie loosened. He looked older in this light, but sharper too, like a man finally using the edge he'd kept sheathed. "Operations is furious," he said. "Legal is divided, and the board wants to know why I approved an overnight grounding without a press strategy." Evelyn didn't look up. "Because strategy comes after safety." Daniel exhaled through his nose. That answer used to be enough. It will be again. Maria glanced between them. "They've locked 2 of the access pathways I use. I can still get in, but they're watching." "Good," Evelyn said. "That tells us where to look next." Maria swallowed. "I didn't sign up for this." "No one ever does," Evelyn said gently. "You sign up for a job, and one day it asks more of you than the description promised." Maria nodded, eyes shining. She stayed. In another wing of the airport, Lorraine Whitaker sat alone in a near-empty first-class cabin. The lights were dimmed for departure. She stared straight ahead, hands folded precisely in her lap, jaw clenched so tight it ached. Around her, other passengers settled in. Murmurs, seatbelts clicking. A normal night flight. But nothing felt normal. She replayed the day in fragments, the moment she'd spoken, the look on the man's face when he'd said her name, the way the room had tilted. Her phone buzzed. A message from her husband, shorter this time. Board meeting tomorrow morning. Don't speak to anyone. Lorraine closed her eyes. For the first time in years, she felt something dangerously close to fear. Back in the compliance wing, Evelyn stood alone before a wall of data, tracing a finger along a timeline that spanned years, not months. Patterns emerged not as spikes, but as absences. Missing reports, delayed reviews, quiet resignations that clustered after internal complaints. Someone had been pruning the record. Her phone rang. Not a message this time, a call. Yes, she said. A man's voice, older, controlled. You don't know me, but I know you. Evelyn didn't respond. You're stirring things up, the voice continued. People who built this system, people who kept planes in the air when budgets were cut and regulators looked the other way. You mean people who decided risk was acceptable? Evelyn said. A pause. You're going to hurt a lot of good people. Evelyn's jaw tightened. No, I'm going to stop them from hurting others. Another pause. Longer. You think the CEO can protect you? I think the truth doesn't need protection, Evelyn replied. It just needs time. The line went dead. Evelyn stared at the dark screen. Then she wrote down the number. Old habit. Evidence first, reaction later. Daniel found her minutes later, concern etched deep now. That was fast. They're escalating, she said, which means they're exposed. He leaned against the table. I'm getting pressure from outside the company. Regulators asking questions they shouldn't even know to ask yet. Evelyn looked at him. Then someone's talking. Yes. Let them, she said. Sunlight moves faster than silence. Daniel studied her, then nodded. I've authorized full cooperation with federal oversight. Maria's head snapped up. Already? Yes, Daniel said. If this is coming down, it's coming down clean. A notification chimed on Evelyn's screen. New data. Maria leaned in. What is that? Daniel asked. A comparison, Evelyn said, between incident rates at bases with high schedule pressure and those without. And the difference isn't marginal, Evelyn said. It's structural. Maria whispered, They built risk into the system. Yes, Evelyn said, and then blamed individuals when it surfaced. The room fell quiet. Outside, the airport slept, or pretended to. Lights blinked. Aircraft waited. The illusion of control held. For now. At 2:30 in the morning, an email hit Daniel's inbox. Subject line plain. Resignation. He opened it, read once, then again. Who? Evelyn asked. Daniel looked up. The retired executive whose credentials were used. Evelyn's eyes narrowed. He's trying to disappear. He claims he knew nothing, Daniel said. Says his access must have been compromised. Evelyn shook her head. Dormant credentials don't wake themselves up. Maria frowned. What happens now? Daniel answered. Now it becomes criminal. A silence followed, heavier than the others. Evelyn closed her laptop. Then we move faster. Can you? Daniel asked quietly. Evelyn met his gaze. For the first time since they'd met, something unguarded crossed her face. Fatigue, not weakness, just the cost of vigilance. Yes, she said, but not alone. Daniel nodded. You won't be. Across the country, Lorraine Whitaker's flight landed in silence. She remained seated as others disembarked, waiting until the aisle cleared. When she finally stood, her legs trembled. At the jet bridge, her phone buzzed again. A new message. Unknown number. You should have stayed quiet. She stared at the words, heart pounding. She typed a response, deleted it, typed again, deleted that too. For the first time in her life, she had no idea what the right move was. Back at the airport, dawn crept along the horizon, thin and pale. Evelyn stood by the window, watching the light return. She had been awake all night. So had the system she was unraveling. Behind her, Daniel spoke into his phone, voice low, deliberate. Yes, I understand. No, we're not delaying. Evelyn didn't turn. The day was coming, and with it, the moment when everything hidden would have to choose whether to surface or sink. The news broke at 6:15 in the morning, not with sirens or press conferences, but with a quiet internal bulletin routed to every senior manager across North Star Airlines. Subject line neutral, language careful, tone unmistakable. Federal oversight initiated. Voluntary cooperation confirmed. Immediate preservation of records required. Daniel Harper read it twice, then once more without blinking. Outside his temporary office, the airport was waking up, coffee carts rolling, crew members gathering in small knots, voices low, eyes alert. Everyone felt it now. The ground had shifted. He stepped into the compliance wing, where Evelyn Carter stood already dressed for the day she hadn't slept through. Her hair was pulled back tighter than before. Dark circles framed her eyes, but her posture was unbroken. She was studying a live feed of maintenance activity from multiple bases, fingers still. They're here, Daniel said. I know, Evelyn replied. They wouldn't wait. 2 men and a woman entered moments later. No uniforms, no badges on display. Calm, practiced movements. One of them, tall and broad-shouldered, with grey at his temples, offered a nod. Ms. Carter, Mr. Harper, I'm Special Agent Mark Ellison, Department of Transportation. This is Agent Brooks and Agent Nguyen. We appreciate your cooperation. Daniel gestured toward the conference room. You'll have it. Ellison glanced around as they walked. You anticipated us? Yes, Evelyn said. And you're late. Ellison smiled faintly. We usually are. Inside the room, screens lit up. Data flowed. Timelines aligned. Evelyn spoke without flourish, without defensiveness. She didn't accuse. She demonstrated. Deferred inspections tied to incentive structures. Access logs showing credential misuse. Internal emails that stopped just short of explicit orders, but left fingerprints everywhere. Ellison watched closely. Brooks took notes. Nguyen asked sharp, surgical questions. This is systemic, Nguyen said quietly. Yes, Evelyn replied. And intentional. Daniel stayed silent, absorbing the weight of it. He had known pieces. He had suspected patterns. Seeing it assembled like this was something else entirely. Who else knows? Ellison asked. Evelyn met his gaze. More people than are admitting it. Outside the room, Maria Lopez stood with her back against the wall, arms crossed tight. Her phone buzzed incessantly. Missed calls, unknown numbers. She ignored them all. Thomas Reed stood a few feet away, hands clasped, eyes fixed on the floor. They're going to tear this place apart, Thomas muttered. They already are, Maria said. We just didn't hear it before. In another terminal, Lorraine Whitaker sat in a rideshare crawling through early morning traffic. The city blurred past her window. She hadn't slept. Her phone rested heavy in her hand, screen glowing with headlines that didn't name her, but circled close enough to burn. Airline audit expands amid internal access concerns. She refreshed. Again. Again. Her husband hadn't replied to her last message. The silence was louder than any argument they'd ever had. At North Star headquarters, executives gathered in glass-walled rooms that suddenly felt too exposed. Lawyers spoke in low tones. Assistants moved quickly, eyes down. The culture of certainty that had once filled these halls was gone, replaced by calculation. Back in the compliance wing, the agents stood. "We'll need full access to all maintenance bases," Ellison said, "and a list of everyone with historical override credentials, including retirees." Daniel nodded. "You'll have it." Ellison paused. "There's something else." Evelyn looked up. "Say it." "We received an anonymous tip last night," Ellison said, "claiming that your presence here was anticipated, that certain individuals were warned weeks ago." Daniel's jaw tightened. "By whom?" Ellison's eyes stayed on Evelyn. "That's what we're here to find out." The room went still. Evelyn didn't look surprised. "Then you should know," she said evenly, "that whoever tipped you off was trying to control the narrative, not reveal the truth." Ellison studied her. "Explain." "Because the warnings came too late," Evelyn said, "and too selectively. They wanted the audit framed as a reaction, not an inevitability." Nguyen leaned forward. "Meaning someone thought they could sacrifice a few names and survive," Evelyn said. "They miscalculated." Daniel felt a chill. "You think this goes higher?" "I know it does." At that moment, a junior assistant knocked once and stepped inside, pale. "Sir, you need to see this." She handed Daniel a tablet. The screen showed a resignation letter, time-stamped 40 minutes earlier. Not the retired executive this time. Someone current. Someone senior. Someone whose name sat just beneath Daniel's on the organizational chart. Daniel closed his eyes briefly. Evelyn watched him. "He's running." "Yes." "Good," she said. "People who run leave trails." Ellison straightened. "We'll want to speak with him." Daniel met his gaze. "You'll need a warrant." Ellison nodded. "Already in motion." Outside, the airport buzzed louder now. News vans began to appear at the perimeter. Phones came out. Whispers spread. Maria felt her phone vibrate again. She glanced once and froze. "What?" Thomas asked. "It's my mother," Maria said quietly. "She saw the news. She's scared." Thomas nodded. "Mine too." They stood there, two small figures in a machine finally being forced to look at itself. Across town, Lorraine Whitaker entered her home and stopped short. A man she didn't recognize sat at her dining table with her husband. Papers spread neatly between them. The air felt wrong. "We need to talk," her husband said. She knew then that whatever power she thought she had was gone. Back in the compliance room, Evelyn gathered her materials. The agents prepared to move. Ellison paused at the door. "You understand this will get messy?" Evelyn nodded. "It already was. We just named it." As they left, Daniel remained standing, staring at the empty chair across from him. "You could have stayed invisible," he said quietly. Evelyn stopped, turned. Then nothing would change. Outside, sunlight flooded the terminal. Passengers moved, planes departed. The system continued, wounded now, aware. And somewhere within it, the truth had found momentum. It would not stop. The first subpoena landed before breakfast, not served by hand, not announced with ceremony. It arrived as an encrypted notification routed through North Star's legal system, time-stamped 6:43 in the morning, precise and indifferent. Daniel Harper read it standing at the window, coffee untouched, watching a line of aircraft taxi in perfect formation. The irony was not lost on him. Behind him, the compliance wing hummed with restrained urgency. Agents moved in and out of rooms, Printer's word. Doors opened and closed with careful restraint. This wasn't chaos. It was something far more dangerous. Order imposed from the outside. Evelyn Carter sat at the long table again, jacket back on, hair immaculate, as if control over the smallest details might steady the weight of what was unfolding. She was reviewing testimony summaries now, not documents. Words mattered more at this stage. What had been said, what hadn't. Where silence had done more damage than lies. Legal wants to slow this, Daniel said without turning. They're arguing scope. They always do, Evelyn replied. Scope is how accountability escapes. Daniel faced her. Ellison's team isn't waiting. No, she said. They won't. As if summoned, Special Agent Ellison appeared in the doorway, expression unreadable. We've confirmed the resignation you flagged. He didn't go home. Daniel's pulse quickened. Where did he go? Private airfield outside Macon, Ellison said. Chartered flight, filed under a shell entity. Evelyn's eyes narrowed. Running. Or repositioning, Ellison replied. We'll know soon. Outside the room, Maria Lopez pressed her back against the wall, phone clutched in her hand. She had stopped answering calls entirely. Every vibration felt like another line being drawn around her life. She thought of her parents, her siblings, the job she had once believed was safe. Thomas Reed approached quietly. They asked me to stay available. Maria nodded. Me too. He hesitated. Do you regret it? She shook her head. I regret that it took this long. Across town, the private airfield sat quiet under a pale morning sky. A single jet waited near the hangar, engines cold. Inside the small terminal, a man in his late 50s paced, phone pressed hard to his ear. His name was Jonathan Hale, Senior Vice President of Operations. Or at least he had been, until dawn. This is being blown out of proportion, he snapped. You said the audit was contained. A voice crackled back, low and calm. It was, until it wasn't. You told me I was covered. I told you the risk was acceptable. Hale stopped pacing. Acceptable to whom? The line went dead. He stared at the phone, chest tight, the realization settling too late. He had mistaken protection for permanence, power for loyalty. Back at North Star, Evelyn stood at the screen as a new dataset loaded. Her breath caught, just slightly. What is it? Daniel asked. Flight simulation discrepancies, she said. Training scenarios adjusted to mask real-world stresses. Not illegal on paper, but dangerous in practice. Daniel's jaw tightened. Who signed off? Evelyn didn't answer immediately. She zoomed in, highlighted a name. Daniel exhaled slowly. He taught half our senior pilots. Yes, Evelyn said, and taught them to trust a system that wasn't honest with them. The room felt colder. Ellison returned, urgency now cutting through his calm. We have movement. Where? Daniel asked. Jonathan Hale's flight plan was filed, but never executed, Ellison said. The jet is still on the ground. Local authorities are moving in. Evelyn closed her eyes briefly. Not relief, resolution. This is where people start talking, she said. And blaming, Daniel added. Yes. In the terminal, news screens flickered to life. Anchors spoke carefully, reading from early briefs. Airline under federal review. No immediate safety risk to passengers. Operations continuing as normal. Passengers watched. Some frowned, some shrugged. Most boarded their flights. But the crew noticed. Pilots exchanged looks. Mechanics moved with heightened care. A quiet recalibration spread through the workforce. Something had been exposed. Something irreversible. In the private lounge, Lorraine Whitaker sat rigid on a sofa she no longer felt entitled to occupy. Across from her, a lawyer spoke in measured tones. The airline is within its rights to suspend your status pending investigation. I did nothing illegal, Lorraine said sharply. That remains to be seen, the lawyer replied. But your statements were recorded. Context matters. Lorraine's fingers dug into the cushion. I was concerned about safety. The lawyer met her eyes. Concern is not a defense if it's weaponized. Lorraine looked away. At the airfield near Macon, blue lights cut through the morning haze. Hale stood frozen as officers approached, hands visible, face pale. His phone lay discarded on the tarmac. Back at headquarters, Daniel watched the confirmation come through. Detained. Questioned. Devices seized. Evelyn felt the shift immediately. The resistance that had pressed against her since arrival eased, just slightly, like a door unlatched. They'll come for you next, Daniel said quietly. They already have, she replied. They just haven't realized it yet. Ellison gathered his team. We're expanding scope, maintenance, training, executive oversight. Daniel nodded. You'll have everything. As the agents moved out, Evelyn remained behind, staring at the reflection of herself in the dark screen. For a moment, she saw not the authority others now projected onto her, but the cost etched beneath it. She thought of the nights spent alone with numbers, the warnings ignored, the moments when walking away would have been easier. Daniel spoke softly behind her. You okay? She didn't answer right away. Then, ask me again when this is over. Outside, the airport moved on. Flights departed, arrivals landed. The illusion of normalcy held. But beneath it, the machinery had changed direction. And for the first time, the system was no longer protecting itself. It was being forced to tell the truth. By mid-morning, the illusion of containment was gone. News vans lined the perimeter roads like silent sentries. Cameras angled upward, searching for windows, for faces, for proof that something extraordinary was unfolding behind glass and steel. Inside North Star headquarters, the air had turned brittle. Every hallway conversation dropped an octave. Every closed door felt deliberate. Evelyn Carter stood before a whiteboard now crowded with names and arrows, a map of cause and consequence spreading outward. She hadn't drawn it for effect. She needed to see it. Needed to understand how many decisions it took to make risk feel normal. Her hand hovered over one name in particular, then moved on. Not yet. Daniel Harper entered, with a folder tucked under his arm, the edges bent from being gripped too tightly. They've requested voluntary testimony from 3 additional executives. Evelyn didn't look up. Voluntary lasts until it doesn't. They're also asking for you. That made her pause. She capped the marker and turned. In what capacity? Witness, for now. She nodded. That won't last either. Outside the compliance wing, Maria Lopez sat at a small desk that hadn't been hers yesterday. A temporary assignment, a subtle relocation that said protection without promising permanence. She scrolled through logs, cross-referencing timestamps, her fingers steady despite the knot in her stomach. Every line she opened felt like a decision that would follow her long after this was over. Thomas Reed leaned against the doorway, watching her work. You didn't have to stay. Yes, Maria said quietly. I did. A message flashed on her screen. Flagged urgent. She frowned, then froze. Thomas, she said, come here. He did. Reed. His face drained. That's a direct override. Yes, Maria said. And it was issued this morning. Thomas shook his head. That can't be right. It is, she replied. Someone is still trying to change the record. In the conference room, Special Agent Ellison listened as Evelyn laid out the update. He didn't interrupt, didn't rush. He had seen this pattern before, the instinct to rewrite history once the future became unavoidable. "They're scared," Ellison said finally. "They should be," Evelyn replied. "They're tampering with evidence." Ellison nodded. "We'll secure the servers, immediately." Daniel exhaled. "Do it." Across the city, Jonathan Hale sat in a stark interview room, hands folded, eyes fixed on the table. The bravado had left him. In its place sat calculation. He knew the rules. He had helped shape some of them. "I didn't force anyone," he said, voice low. "I optimized." The agent across from him didn't react. "You authorized changes that reduced safety margins." Hale shrugged. "Margins are subjective." The agent slid a folder across the table. Photos, logs, emails, patterns. Hale stared, swallowed. "You don't understand the pressure." The agent leaned forward. "Then help us understand it." Back at headquarters, Lorraine Whitaker stood in her kitchen staring at the phone in her hand. Her lawyer's voice echoed in her head. Context matters. She had replayed her words 100 times, each time softer, less certain. The certainty she had worn like armor now felt brittle, exposed to air. Her doorbell rang. She hesitated, then opened it. 2 people stood there, professional, calm, not law enforcement, yet. "Ms. Whitaker," one said, "we're conducting interviews related to an ongoing investigation. May we come in?" She nodded, stepping aside. The house felt suddenly too large, too quiet. Back in the compliance wing, the servers went dark one by one as federal seals were applied. Technicians worked with deliberate care. No rush, no spectacle. The work of preservation. Evelyn watched, arms folded, her face unreadable. Daniel stood beside her. "You're not wrong," he said quietly, "about any of this." She didn't answer at first. Then, "Being right isn't the same as being ready." "For what?" "For what comes after." A notification chimed. Ellison glanced at his phone. "We have corroboration." "From where?" Daniel asked. "From training," Ellison said. "Instructors are coming forward, quietly. They were told to adapt scenarios, make them more manageable, more optimistic." Evelyn closed her eyes briefly. The image formed in her mind. Simulations that never quite reflected reality. Pilots trained to expect forgiveness where none would exist. "That's how accidents happen," she said. "Yes," Ellison replied. "And how blame gets assigned." In the terminal, a pilot paused before a departure gate, watching a news segment play on mute. His reflection stared back at him from the screen. He thought of checklists, of trust, of the unspoken contract between those who sign off and those who fly. He turned away, jaw set. In the records room, Maria leaned back, exhausted. "They locked me out." Thomas frowned. "Of what?" "The override log," she said. "But it doesn't matter. I copied it." Thomas let out a breath he'd been holding all morning. "You're going to get yourself fired." Maria nodded. "Probably. Worth it." "Yes." Evelyn entered then, taking in the scene with a single glance. "Send it to me," she said. Maria did. No hesitation. Evelyn scanned the file. Her finger stopped. A familiar name appeared again, the one she had skipped earlier. "There you are," she murmured. Daniel watched her expression change. "What?" "This is the pivot," she said. "The point where it stops being negligence and becomes orchestration." Ellison stepped closer. "Who?" Evelyn looked up. Someone the public trusts. Someone who speaks about safety while quietly redefining it. Daniel felt the weight of it settle.
If that goes public, it will, Evelyn said, but not yet.
Outside, the press gathered closer. Statements were drafted and redrafted, words chosen carefully, every syllable weighed. Inside, the truth pressed forward, indifferent to comfort. Evelyn straightened, shoulders back, eyes clear. The fatigue was still there, but something else had joined it now. Momentum. This doesn't end with one arrest, she said, or one resignation. Daniel nodded. I know. It ends when the system can't lie to itself anymore. A silence followed, heavy, necessary. Then Ellison spoke. We're ready when you are. Evelyn looked at the board, at the names, at the lines connecting them, at the cost. Give me one more hour, she said. Then we tell the whole story. Outside, clouds drifted across the sky, casting brief shadows over the runways. Planes continued to land and depart, guided by systems now under scrutiny. And somewhere between exposure and reckoning, the final barrier was beginning to crack. The press room filled before the doors officially opened. Cameras lined the back wall, lenses trained on a single podium bearing the North Star Airlines logo. The air buzzed with restrained urgency, reporters murmuring into phones, producers whispering countdowns. Outside the glass, the late afternoon sun washed the tarmac in gold, planes moving with deliberate calm, as if nothing inside the building had changed. Everything had. Daniel Harper stepped to the podium without notes, no teleprompter, no script. His expression was composed, but the room felt the weight behind it. This was not damage control. This was reckoning. Thank you for being here, he began. Today, North Star Airlines confirms that we are cooperating fully with a federal investigation into our maintenance, training, and safety oversight practices. He paused, letting the words land. What has been uncovered is not a single failure or a single individual's mistake. It is a systemic breach of trust. Cameras clicked faster. Daniel continued, voice steady. Effective immediately, multiple senior executives have been removed from their positions. Additional aircraft have been grounded, pending independent review. And going forward, this company will operate under direct federal supervision until corrective measures are complete. A murmur rippled through the room. Most importantly, Daniel said, the findings that led to this moment were not exposed by chance. They were brought forward by someone who refused to accept that quiet compromise was the cost of doing business. He stepped back slightly and turned. Evelyn Carter walked into view. She did not wear a suit, just a dark blazer and a light blouse, simple and unadorned. Her posture was calm, but her presence shifted the room. Conversations stopped. A few reporters recognized her immediately from leaked documents and unnamed sources. Others simply sensed that this was the center of the story. Evelyn stood beside Daniel, hands resting lightly at her sides. For years, Daniel said, Ms. Carter served this industry without recognition, without protection, and without the authority she deserved. Today, I want to make something clear. She was not an outsider. She was the conscience this system tried to ignore. Evelyn stepped forward. Her voice was quieter than Daniel's, but it carried farther. I didn't come here to expose a company, she said. I came here because safety is not a slogan. It's a discipline. And disciplines fail when people stop asking uncomfortable questions. A reporter raised a hand. Ms. Carter, did you anticipate this level of misconduct? Evelyn didn't hesitate. I anticipated resistance. I anticipated pressure. I did not anticipate how long the warning signs had been normalized. Another voice cut in. Are passengers safe right now? Yes, Evelyn said. Because the aircraft that should not be flying are not flying. Because people chose to act instead of explain. In the back of the room, Maria Lopez watched from a monitor, arms wrapped around herself, heart pounding. Thomas Reed stood nearby, silent. They had been told not to attend, but neither could look away. The faces on the screen were familiar now, stripped of hierarchy, exposed to consequence. Across the city, Lorraine Whitaker sat in her living room, television muted, the image frozen on Evelyn's face. The house felt hollow. Her lawyer had left an hour earlier. The words still echoed. Corporate ban, permanent, review ongoing, public record. She reached for the remote, then stopped. She had already seen enough. Back at the press room, Daniel returned to the podium. "There will be accountability," he said. "There will be reform. And there will be transparency, even when it costs us." He looked directly into the cameras. "That is not a promise to investors. It is a promise to the public." The briefing ended without applause. No one expected it. Within hours, headlines spread. Airline safety overhaul. Executives detained. Federal oversight expands. But beneath the noise, something quieter moved through the workforce. Mechanics double-checking steps that had once been rushed. Instructors rewriting scenarios they had softened for years. Pilots reading memos slowly, carefully, as if seeing their own profession clearly for the first time in a long while. At dusk, Evelyn stood alone by the window overlooking the runway. A wide-body aircraft rolled into position, lights bright against the darkening sky. Clearance granted. Throttles forward. Lift. Daniel joined her without speaking. They watched the plane rise together, the wheels folding inward as it climbed. "You changed the course," he said. Evelyn shook her head. "I interrupted it. The rest is up to everyone else." He nodded. "What will you do now?" She considered the question, really considered it. "I'll keep doing the work, just with fewer shadows." Daniel smiled faintly. "We're creating a new role. Independent oversight, direct reporting, authority that can't be buried." Evelyn looked at him. "Good." Night settled fully. The airport lights blinked in steady rhythm, no longer just symbols of movement, but of vigilance. In the days that followed, resignations multiplied. Charges were filed, policies rewritten. Other airlines watched closely, some quietly adopting changes before questions reached them. The industry shifted, not overnight, but undeniably. And Evelyn Carter returned to what she had always done best: watching systems, listening to patterns, asking the questions no one wanted asked, until it was too late. The story didn't end with applause or vindication. It ended with something rarer: integrity, restored one decision at a time. Like, subscribe, comment.